Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to Finally I Choose Me, where authenticity meets purpose. Tonight, we are excited. I have my high school friend, sister, church, pew ministry friend, partnership, and a lot of endeavors with me. God did not give me like a script tonight or to present. I started off thinking about the Eastside SHEroes because if you don't know that the East Side of Detroit, just have a natural bond. If we run into somebody and we figure, hey, you from the East Side, then we automatically click. But this has been International Women's Month. And usually try to find someone to share their story, their journey. And I decided that this time, the shero that I will talk about is my own mom. And then with me, I have Elder Cheryl Coleman Brown, who have also lost her mom at a very early age and lost the women who raised her. And so this show is for the unsung Eastside SHEroes or who are no longer with us. And I thought, it was just a good idea to talk about, when you've lost your mom and being rooted in the East Side of Detroit. So for this, we're going to discuss our deceased parent, mother, grandmother, who raised us, and just to kind of share the impact, who they were, how people love them, how they love people. And in spite of challenges, how do you honor your shero if they are no longer with us? If it's grief that you may still experience. I know a lot of times Mother's Day, people run for Mother's Day. And we're just going to talk about it. So welcome Cheryl Coleman Brown to the show. I kind of freestyled. I didn't invite people. I just said, hey, if you want to join, let's just get on and talk. And so welcome to Finally I Choose Me.
Well, thank you for having me on tonight. It is indeed a pleasure to share this space with you. And I'm looking forward to our dialogue on tonight to talk about the great women who have impacted our lives, who have made us the women that we are today. We have come a long way, and in that,
mighty long way.
And I'm certainly grateful for all my roller coaster rides. But every time, when you're on a roller coaster, the ride has to come to a stop. So I'm thankful for everything that I've experienced thus far in my life. So
thank you. So I'm going to start off just by asking you first before I go into my journey. So Cheryl, I don't remember the moment, but I do know you were in high school when you lost both your parents, but for the sake of this show, you lost your mother at 16.
Yeah, that is correct.
So what do you want to share about that experience, but also being a teenager, still being young, what do you want to highlight about her strength or what it is that you experienced, even though we know our stories personally and they may not have been what we the ideal mother-daughter story, but the Bible tells us to honor thy mother and thy father, our days shall be longer. It also says parents don't provoke your children, but we're going to stay on the honor part because I think that matters, especially in today's society with so many broken relationships, so much grief, unfinished business, and you lose your mother.
Yeah. I think my mother was, to me now, as I understand who I am as a woman, but I also understand her better. My mom was 42 years old when she passed away. She had, for many years, she had lived a good life, a certain portion of her life. But we know the trick of the enemy. Sometimes they come in a smooth taste in the form of a man. And so she got caught up in one relationship that led her to using drugs. And when she passed away, she wasn't using drugs, but because of her long life of addiction, it impacted her when upon her passing. She had a seizure, and she wasn't able to recover from that seizure. The epilepsy was really due to her substance abuse. Um, but I think when I think about her, I kind of focus on a lot of the fun times we had, because I think she was kind of like, I recognize her as being quiet, but there was a wild side to her. And
Mm-hmm.
I can remember it's 1983, and we're going to downtown to Cobo Hall or Joe Louis Arena, I think, to see Marvin Gaye.
Mm.
And she has on this outfit that she redesigned, right? My
Mm-hmm.
sister gave her a dress. Remember the t-shirt dresses, kind of like where they had the
Mm-hmm.
splits on the side, but she knew how to sew. So she made her four splits. She had two on the side and two on the front. And I'm like embarrassed, like, why are you dressed like this? And she was a proud 1970 60 person. So her
Mm-hmm.
famous line would be, yeah, show you right, dig it, dig it. And I'd be like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed by this lady, but not realizing that my mom is 42 years old. So she had her children young. She had me at 27, but she had my brother and sister at 16 and 17. So at 42, and when I look at me at 42, I wanted to have fun too. So
Exactly.
yeah, so in retrospect, she was just like, I'm having fun. I'm taking my daughter to see Marvin Gaye. And when he said, let's get it on, and everybody in the room started screaming, and I was slumped down in the bottom of the chair because I'm so embarrassed by my mother just acting crazy. But now I know, like, okay, you just partying just like I would be partying, if I was out at a concert or something. But she made a great impact because she tried her very best to tell me everything she could before she died.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we had a week-long conversation about different things in life. Um, about one question was, who was my father? So now we know some other things about that. And we talked about why did she get on drugs and how did that happen. I asked her, why did she choose to leave me with my great grandmother to raise me and not her take on responsibility? So I did get a chance to ask those questions, not realizing that by the end of that week, she would be gone. Like, we started on Sunday, and by Thursday, um, we were having a talent show at Murray Wright. And
Shout out
um,
to Murray Wright class of 1985.
yeah, uh, that Wednesday, I believe it was, um, she passed away. I came home from our practice, and when I got home, my father had called me and told me that she had died, and I was like, that's impossible because I just talked to her, and she said she was coming to the talent show tomorrow. And so it just kind of blew me back, and I won't necessarily say I was angry, and I recognized that people did not um, talk to kids about grief. I realized that as a child that nobody ever asked me. They just assumed I was okay. And for the most part, there were times that I was okay, but there were a lot of times that I wasn't okay. And when I wasn't okay, I kind of kind of kept to myself mostly, and I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
say anything. And then when I did say stuff, it seemed like I was mad at everybody. So I
Well,
kind of,
that's one of the stages of grief. It's anger, and I
yeah,
don't think we talk enough about it.
yeah, I was mad because then soon thereafter, about 3 weeks later, then my father died. And I remember telling my father, and this is like a selfish thing that I said, but I so vividly remember it. I said to him, ain't none of y'all gonna be here when I graduate from high school, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my great grandmother and grandmother were there, but my father died 3 weeks um, later, and then his mom died that March of '85. And so I was like on this whirlwind of losing people as a kid, you know. Um, I just, I don't know. I learned how to pray early. And I learned that life was precious really early, right? So I try not to do things with the mindset of regret. So sometimes people say, well, you saying yes to this and you saying yes to that. Some of it is a part of that I don't want to take. I want to use every minute that I have to do the things that God has purposed me to do. Some of it, maybe I should say no, but in the moment when I say yes, that's what I feel.
And
Um,
and I'm not, of course, going to say that's not so, but what I think is we don't talk enough about our true core feelings, losing and not having a mother.
oh,
Um,
absolutely.
and so I think for this show and honoring them, could you please share with us what was your mother's name?
My mother's name was Bennett, and Bennett
Lynette.
Jenkins.
Okay.
Bennett Jenkins. Her first husband, his name was Roland Jenkins. She never. She had like 4 marriage licenses to marry to marry my father, James Coleman. But for whatever reason, they had all these marriage licenses, but they never made it to the chapel. So,
I saw someone had put in the chat about their sheroes, but I don't see it now. Um, and so thank you for that thus far. But I know, so your mom left you in the hands of some strong women. Um, not having a mother, I was 37 when I lost my mother, 38, 37. Leonard says, thank you, Leonard, for being here. But his mother, Ida, his aunt, Barbara, and his second mother, Janice. And I made a post probably a few weeks ago. Well, my mother, it's been 21 years this month that she's been gone. And I made a post, of course, because I'm going to always do that. I'm going to honor her. But
mhm,
then it wasn't a sad post. It was, I'm still here and God has sent other women in my life. And if you're not careful, you can be so upset about not having your mother, and you're going to grieve, you're going to, anticipate parts of your life that happens without them that you wish they were a part of. But
absolutely.
at the same time, there were other women that God did send. Now, my mother, um, she had me. She was 23. She was married. Um, and I just remember as a young girl, as a little girl, my mother was beautiful. I mean, she kept her makeup and hair, and she was really pretty. And, I remember just staring at her as she was putting her makeup on. And then even saying to myself, oh, I wish I was as pretty as my mother, not realizing that I looked just like her. But my mother was more quiet. She was more, she kept things to herself. She was more isolated. But I think a strength of hers in coming up, being a single parent, having myself and my brothers, and then taking on the children of her sister who was murdered in 1988, and her children already being adults pretty much, and having to take them in. So we were raised together like they were our sisters and brothers. And she could have made a different decision, and she didn't. And when I reflect back as why I'm honoring her today, she would let anybody who didn't have nowhere to live in her house, no matter what the condition was, no matter what. And so a shero here is also my aunt who was murdered. Who on the watching the show is Donna Marie Gillen, who was my aunt slash sister, which was Kai's mother and her children's grandmother, who also when I reflect back, she was a big protector of me. But we grew up as sisters. She lost her life at 28 years old, also in the month of March. And so March, it has been a very trying time, but I'm honoring them today because just because your life does not turn out the way that maybe you anticipated, or if someone struggles with their mother who is not here and they did not necessarily, bond well or didn't do things well, there's still something to honor, if nothing more the fact that they had the courage to birth you.
Amen.
Because without them birthing us, there would be no conversation. So when I reflect back on my mother, she had a lot of pain. She had a lot of pain, but she pressed on in spite of, in raising myself and my brothers and my Kai and Courtney, and anybody, Deasia, Kai's first child, anybody that needed. And I used to be like, Mom, how you do that? Because I ain't like that. Now I want to help you. But, just anybody could just come and stay. So I call her house like the movie Lackawanna Blues. And so I just really want to call out. Someone else called out their grandmother, Ruthie Mae Carter, Catherine Haskin, Joan Mills, Flora Harris, Mary Teague, Antique Miller. I mean, these are women that deserve this space. And the world, in their definition of what success is, sometimes doesn't measure up to so many other people, great people who have made contributions. And of course, I'm talking about the East Side, but if you're on here, you're not from the East Side, that's fine. We love you. But when I reflect back, and her story, my mother's story was one of a lot of pain. And we don't really talk about pain, but there's purpose connected to pain. And I just really want to take this time to honor her for all of what she tried to do, because I can say that each of her children are successful and educated and independent and leaders in the communities that we're in. But I imagine putting myself in her shoes, with so many loss, her grandmother, her mother, divorce. She was in a relationship. He was killed. Her only sister was murdered. Her cousin brother was murdered. All of these loss that I'm present in, but not really realizing the impact. And then later, her transitioning with her own battles with addiction. But then when I was able to put myself in her shoes, I was like, wow, I can only imagine. And so I'm giving a shout out today to Patricia Ann Lawson, who was a dynamic woman. Everybody loved her. All of my brother's friends live with us and call her mom, OG, whatever. And it's something about her spirit that everyone loved and was able to connect with her. Because she kept it real. She just didn't talk as much as I did or do, but she did. And so if you're tuning in and you have an Eastside SHEroes or someone you want to mention who's no longer with us, drop her name in the link on the page, and we'll keep talking. So Cheryl, you were raised by who after the passing of your mother?
So actually, I was raised, my mother, when I was 2 months old, she gave me to my great grandmother. So at the time, my great grandmother was, she is the same age we are now, taking a newborn. So,
oh Lord,
right, exactly. And when I put that in perspective, that's a whole nother thing. Because she was working, she was a housekeeper, and she worked. Sometimes she would take me to work. I remember going like 3 years old, going to work with her, and she she did what she had to do. She took the responsibility of raising not only me but my brother and my sister. Um, she became my guardian. I was looking at the paperwork not too long ago. I think it was like June of 1969 when she requested welfare assistant to take care of me. And so when I look at that, my great grandmother, uh, not book educated, but very, very smart. She owned her own home. Um, we never went without anything, and anything that I ever asked for, somehow I managed to have it. I didn't realize I was poor till I got to college and I had a Pell Grant. Um, but I had everything I ever desired from her. I drove a car in high school. I had my own ride. I just had everything that I desired. My grandmother, she was a no nonsense woman, though. She would tell you flat out, you get in trouble, use your dime to call somebody else because you got to make good decisions. And so I never had, I never got in the way of getting in trouble. You know what I'm saying? I might do something, but I didn't do nothing where nobody was gonna call her because I'm gonna be honest, I was afraid of her. I was afraid. I didn't want nothing to happen. I did not ever want to embarrass her. Um, I always wanted to make sure that she was proud of me, and I just respected her, and I appreciated the sacrifices she made for not only me but my brother and sister. And my mother probably, I think my brother and sister were like 10 or 9 when they came, but I was a brand new baby when she made that decision. And my grandmother said that I was at the house when the welfare person came to talk to her about my brother and sister.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on the couch, and the welfare lady, her name was Miss Johnson. And Miss Johnson asked my grandmother, "Well, what about that baby?" And my grandma said, "No, this baby just supposed to be visited." And Miss Johnson said, "No, Miss Jackson, I think you better add that baby too." And my grandmother said she went on ahead and added me. And she said from that time, my mother didn't, my mother would not come back home. She brought me, and I may not, I may see her at the time when I was little. I might have seen her like every 6 or 7 months, and then there would be times where I would see her more often. To me, it was like when I saw my mother, it was like a family friend coming to visit, right? Everybody else, we called her by her name. Um, there were no like my kids call me Ma, but we call my great grandmother Madia. Today, she was born today, March 29th, 1908. So this is kind of I don't know how this happened, but it did. And
Divine.
yeah, absolutely. Her name was Laura Jackson, and like your mother, she let some of everybody live with us. I mean, everybody. I'm like, why are these people here? I had one friend that was a neighbor, and she came and she sat and talked with my grandmother. And then one day she was living with us. And she lived with us not just like for a couple months, but she lived with us for years. I mean, years, you know. And she had a whole mother on the west side, but she lived with us for years. And my grandmother, to this day, Tamla will tell you that my grandmother saved her life. She told you
Yeah.
got to go to work, you got to go to school. You cannot be late. Don't be laying up depending on no man. She was just a straight shooter. Um, I could never miss church. No matter what I did all night long, she was knock on my bedroom door because no doors were ever closed in the house, unfortunately. But she would knock on the door and say, "You know what time it is?" And I was like, "Oh God." I gotta get up. Yes, get up. And I caught the bus to church, and she made sure I went. Um, she made sure that I understood what God meant. and how important it was to have a relationship with God. But I think I learned that more when my mother died, right? I think I really embraced that God to be my comforter and to be my friend and to be my helper when my mother died. Yeah.
Well,
But
that's a blessing if you learned that at 16.
yeah, I
Uh,
learned that at 16. Yeah.
um, no one really talks about death, so we're honoring our departed women. So my grandmother, Ella Teresa Gillen, died when I was just 9. And but I remember like that picture of her washing,
Oh wow.
braiding, then twisting. Your hair had to dry on its own. You didn't
Yeah.
what no blow dry. And I swear to God, it used to take her 15 different ways to do my hair. And I had a lot of hair. My hair was as thick as this wig. And I would be so frustrated, but we would sit in that kitchen. I would be on that stool, and she would do one by one and press my hair with the grease. I can't think of the name of it, but
that royal, either Royal Crown.
Royal Crown or Bergamot.
Mm-mm-mm.
And that now I see what precious time that was, because at my grandmother's, because my mother was working, we sat at the dinner table. And every time at the same time, we would have dinner. And I think we sometimes overlook those traditions because we would have dinner. I still remember what she would cook, and we would have alligator syrup
Mm-hmm.
with some biscuits and butter and some fried chicken. And it was just a precious time. And you don't know that she died when I was so young. But my memory is of her taking care of me when my mother was not there. But the point I want to get to in honoring her, she had a lot of heaviness and things that she went through too. But when she passed away, all I remember is I was at what is it, in the summer camp,
Mm-hmm.
Bible school summer camp. And she died, and they just came and got me. Didn't say nothing else. All I know is she was gone. And I remember my cousin, may she rest in peace, took me to the funeral home and still didn't say nothing. I'm standing there looking at her body in a casket, my grandmother, and no one said nothing. Like, are you okay? Or even to explain what was happening. But hear how God, when you reflect back, she got sick. She had a stroke. And I'm bawling and I'm crying. And my mother said, well, she'll be okay. I said, I don't think I'm gonna see my grandmother again.
Mm.
And just to experience that and reflecting back when you talk about the things that come out of your mouth
Yeah.
as a kid, that comes into fruition. But my point is, I always reflect back like nobody said nothing.
No.
Just nothing. I wasn't able to attend the funeral because my mother didn't believe in kids going to funerals, so I didn't go to that. And she was never discussed again. And so it
Wow.
was about 5 years ago. I was driving on the freeway with my daughter, and my cousin sent me a text, a picture, like, look what I found. And I cried like a baby, like she had just died in my 50s. And she died when I was 9, because it was like she was just gone. Nobody said
Mhm.
nothing else. You know what I mean? And the impact of losing the matriarchs in your family, young, old, and indifferent, and no one talks about them, or because they was not this person on TV, or they didn't, and they just were community women. neighborhood women who worked, took care of their kids, which should be honored because that
Absolutely.
task alone.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
and so my grandmother, Ella Teresa Gillen, she was married. Her maiden name was Walker. But she died when I was 9 years old. So I didn't grow up with any grandma experiences that were endearing to my heart. So no relationship with, I never met my great grandmother. Her name was Selena. Never met
Mm.
her. I saw a picture. She was light skinned with gray eyes. And that's all I know because once people back in the day seemingly leave, nobody is saying nothing else.
Yeah. So it's like we have like now we have Facebook, we keep our loved ones alive in that regard, but we somehow must always celebrate them somehow, do something to honor them. Not just Mother's Day, but just any day that you choose to honor them. Like um my grandmother, she died in 2014, and I can remember me and my sons, we were at uh CVS looking for a Mother's Day card for her. And so this card I picked out was all mushy, mushy. And my son was like, "Who's that card for?" I said, "That's for Grandma Sylvester." He was like, "Oh no, put that back. That don't even sound like her because she is not a mushy person." She's
Mhm.
like, he's like, "Oh no, they don't have a warrior card." I was like, "No, they don't have a warrior card." Because she was a gardener, she was a hunter, she was a fisher woman, not the traditional woman that's, smart, educated, uh, but not doing the traditional things. Like she's not gonna go shopping. She's not gonna go shopping. She'll go to Pioneer Market or Save a Lot, whatever, and buy a case of chicken to feed all the cats in the neighborhood. But she's not gonna eat any of the chicken from the grocery store because she gonna have some chickens in her backyard. Just kind of off the kill. And so my son was like, "No, you can't get her that Mother's Day card." I said, "Well, I guess we just write something inside of a card." And he was like, "Yeah, ma, just write something inside of the card because all this mushy stuff that don't sound like Grandma Sylvester. She's not even gonna like that card." And I just thought it was so funny how his perspective of her. And
Mhm.
she was a marksman. She could she was only 4'9", and most shotguns were taller than her. But I saw her shoot. She would take me with her. We were out in some field up in, I don't know, somewhere past Belleville somewhere, and a snake came up upon us, and she shot the snake, and I'm terrified. I'm like, this lady is so wild, so great. I was, oh my god, she's so wild and crazy. What's wrong with my grandmother? But she lived by her own beat. She did things the way she wanted to do them, and I respect that. Not trying to keep up with the Joneses. you know I would call her and tell her, I would call her from work, and she would always tell me, "You better get off them people phone, they gonna fire your butt. You better get off their phone." And I'd be like, "They not gonna fire." "No, no, no. When I worked at the place, if you got on them white folks' phone, they'll fire you." So she said, "You better get off them people phone calling me, girl." I'd be like, I would laugh because I knew every time I would call her from work, that's what she would tell me. Because she said a man, one of the people she worked for, they thought she used their phone, and they fired her. And so I was like, wow, I was like, this the help all over again, thinking like she lived through a time where people would treat folks that way and just fire you for no reason, So just
Well,
her.
that still going on today. I'm a witness. But what street did you grow up on?
Oh my goodness. I grew up on Heidelberg Street, the street where the
Heidelberg Street.
Heidelberg, where the junk art is right now. It started in 1984 that Tyree Guyton started putting that stuff out there on the street. But I grew up on Heidelberg, and sometimes I let Heidelberg come out. But for the most part, most people would know that. They think I'm
Well,
from
it's nothing wrong, but see, that's the thing. That's okay.
But
That
I
they
don't
do
mind.
know.
I don't mind. I don't mind that you know. You know what I'm saying? But I do know. I will say this about myself. Because I come from Heidelberg and because I come from the East Side, I have learned to be flexible and learn how to adapt in any situation that comes upon me. And I really think it's from being brought up on the East Side of Detroit.
Well, it's a level of resilience. Somebody asked the question, what can we do to pass on lessons we learned? And I was sitting here thinking of maybe some of the things that my mother had me do that I was mad that I had to do. But I think to answer your question, I think one of the things we can do is story tell. What happened to us telling the stories of the traditions of how we ate dinner at the table and how we came in when the street lights came on and the whole block would be in the house at when the street lights or everybody kind of made dinner at the same time. But when I reflect back and thinking about my mother, of course, may she rest in peace, and I'm glad we're honoring our sheroes who are no longer with us, because the world keeps going and it's up to us to maintain the memories and share stories. And so I tell people I was born an adult, and
Me too.
I'm cooking chicken at 6. Like, why am I cooking chicken at 6? What's the problem? But when I tell you I'm a phenomenal cook today, because of it. Or I remember not having the wash machine, or the wash machine was broke, and scrubbing some clothes. Hey, listen, don't nothing make you stronger than washing some blue jeans in the tub and scrubbing them on one of them scrub boards and squeezing them out so that you can hang them up. Now, if you have gone through that, you have a level of resilience that no one else can talk about, because washing clothes in the tub and on the scrub board and then rinsing them and then taking them outside, not in the dryer, taking them outside and hanging clothes up with the
Those
clothespins in
pairs.
the backyard, that created a level of resilience, even though I was mad that I had to do those things. And so when you reflect back on some of the things you had to do, like now, if you to get help, you got to pay somebody. Well, we was told, get up and go over there and help your auntie clean that house up. Wasn't no
Right.
about no paying you to do nothing. So every Saturday, you get up early. After you wasn't watching TV, you were getting up and cleaning up. So
Yeah.
there were some traditional things. And I think some of those traditions, although they may seem to be outdated, it created substance and resilience
Yeah.
that I'm not sure exist in the same way, because of the things that we had to do. Wasn't no option. I couldn't say, no, can we do it later? Or Ma, can't eat that. What you listen, I have sat at the table for hours until I ate what she said eat. Just period.
Yeah.
So that teaches you something, some tenacity.
Yeah.
And so not to minimize even those small types of lessons because you got feelings about it, or it didn't make you feel good. And
But but
so we don't
but
tend to talk about those things.
but I think those things have given us the skill to survive, right? How to survive in the hardest of times when life makes a shift. You don't lose your mind. And when things change, you don't have the same amount of money. You got to shift with your meal planning or whatever you got going on. You got to make that change. I remember, like, in 1972, my great grandmother's house caught on fire, and my mother lived around the corner at that time, and so she had to take us for a period of time. But my mother, she would mix up pills and all kinds of stuff. I don't know. She had every physician reference book in the house, so she knew how to mix up a concoction, right? I thought that a physician reference book was a part of the dining room table, like the Bible and the physician reference book. I didn't realize it later that she was stealing all the physician reference books out of the hospital, but she would be packing her physician reference book. And so when I would leave, I went to daycare at the Franklin Wright Settlement, which is on Charlevoix, and it was one of the first Head Start programs back in the 60s. And so when I went to Head Start, there was a driver, Mr. George. He would drop us off. But I knew my mother didn't have the capability or the capacity, I'll say capacity, to take care of her 4-year-old daughter. So when Mr. George would pull up to the house, I never went into the house. I went across, I got out the van and I went into my neighbor's house. Her name was Gladys Ellaby. Miss Ellaby had about 6 or 7 children of her own. And I would come into Miss Ellaby's house like I was one of her children. I would come to her kitchen, sit down and talk to her, tell her about my day. And she would set my plate just like she did with her other children. And I felt like later on, I realized that I had learned that I knew how to survive. I made good solutions. I had problem solving skills at the age of 4. I figured out that nothing's going to happen across the street on Preston. I better go over here to Miss Ellaby house so that I could eat. Because my mother is not cooking. She has not cooked. And when she did cook, or no, let me rephrase this, she didn't cook. What she would do is, when she wanted to feed me by myself, we would make a trip up to what was called King's Hamburgers, which is now Gratiot, Coney Island, on the corner of Gratiot and MacDougall. They had little jukeboxes in there. And we would sit there. She would put dimes in the machine and play the music and order me a burger and some French fries. And that's what she would do for me. But her cooking, that did not happen. I don't ever remember her cooking a meal for me. And so when I had children, I said, I got to make sure that I know how to cook so I could cook for my children. My grandmother.
That's why you still cook like you do for all 3 of them grown men every day.
Every day. That's exactly why I cook for them. I make their plates every day, and we sit and have a small conversation when I'm passing plates. And but that it does stem from that, because my mother never cooked anything for me. Never. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm not making it up. She never cooked anything for me. Now, my father, he would cook. But my mother, I don't even know if she knew how to boil water. My sister always said, she knew how to cook. I was like, I never seen it.
So what I'm hearing when we reflect on, and, of course, may your mother, your grandmother, and great-grandmother all rest in peace, is that sometimes it's not what you have or what you experience, what you don't experience, that sometimes propel you to a place to produce things that you didn't even experience yourself.
Absolutely.
And so my mom cooked, but when she got a certain, she began to struggle. So like in my teenage years, that kind of went out the window. And, I had already had a job at 12. I was a babysitter. So, me eating and buying my own school clothes started at 12 years old. Because here's the thing, the tough love syndrome was a real thing. And that don't mean abuse. It does today for some people, but that doesn't mean abuse. It was like, look, you got to figure it out. And if you can't figure it out, then that's too bad for you. And so when I had my son, my mother was like, you got to pay me to babysit. But I'm like, really? What kind of grandma I got to pay to babysit? Well, because ain't nothing free. You know what I mean? And so although I was mad about that, and I was only making $5.15 an hour, how do I pay my mama $50 a week? But it taught responsibility. You had that baby. No, I'm not sitting up here keeping no baby for you to have fun. And so, when you honor, what did that teach you? Like, some of these things may not have been said in a conversation, but it was said in life circumstances. And what did it teach you? And my mother definitely taught me how to be independent.
Yeah.
Because she would say, listen, Ain't nobody gonna do it for you. Whatever you do, you better try to do the best that you can.
Yeah.
And because no one is coming to your rescue. But the flip side of that, some of those things that we experience can put you in hypervigilance that you just got to feel like you got to control and do everything. And it can backfire. So it's finding that balance that's important, but in honoring what they had to give, and not looking at what we did not have, but what we had and how it worked and how it created stability, how it created character, how it created, your ability to make decisions and your ability to make it happen, because no one was overcompensating back then to make you feel good. That that wasn't happening. Like, I'm
No.
sorry, you feel this way. This is what I'm cooking. If this ain't what you want, you on your own. And so that can also cause some level of anger if you're not careful. But what did it teach you? What did the anger teach you? What you thought should happen in your household that didn't happen? What did it teach you? What made you resilient? And then how do you, when you lose a mother, a grandmother, and there's unfinished business, because that's how you feel, how do you heal? How do you move forward? How do you mend your broken heart? Because you have things in your mind that you anticipate is going to happen with this parent or with this grandparent, and it just doesn't happen. And it leaves you disappointed when you lose someone, your mother, your grandmother, your godmother, who were the matriarch in your life. I always imagined that I would grow up and take my mother on a couple of trips. That didn't happen. And so how do you mend that? Because it's unfinished business. So we have to be creative and do things for other people that matter. And so Eastside, Cheryl grew up on Heidelberg. I lived all over the Eastside growing up. I went to 5 elementary schools. I was all over the East Side. So shout out to 48214, 48213, 48205, 48224. All over the East Side. Do you hear me? So that's why I'm East Side till I die, because it's roots there of some really great happy times in spite of the struggle.
Oh yeah. When I think about my life, I know that there was some negative things, but overall, I believe I've had a wonderful life. Um, when I think about how do I honor them? How do I represent them? Um, I always think, like, when I travel the world, I am living out something that my mother never had the opportunity to do. Right? I love to travel, but also when I travel, I think, man, she would have loved to seen this. Especially when I went to Rome, and she always used to watch all them old gladiator movies and stuff. And I like, wow, it's the Colosseum. How many times have I seen this in a movie? Um, just all those things. I think when I travel, I think I'm living out something for my mother as well as for myself. But I think that her life was shortened. So therefore, she didn't get to do everything that she wanted to do. And so, or I don't know if that was her desire, right? I never got a chance to ask that question. But I do believe when I travel, I think I honor her. Um, when I love on my children, I think that I honor my great grandmother, especially um, because she was so adamant of me how I would raise these boys to be
Yeah.
men, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I honored that. Now I really wish that my mom had lived to see these boys, her grandsons. She did get to meet my niece because my sister had her when she was 18. I think my mother was like 34 or 35 when she became a grandmother. So she did get to meet my niece. But I really think how I honor them is to never be ashamed of where I come from and who I come from. Right.
You know, that's a great point. Someone asked, "What was the stigma about the East Side?" Now, I haven't researched it because, for one, I do have an answer, but the East Side has a amazing historical history of Black-owned businesses and Black Bottom and Paradise Valley and all of those until I-75 came in to create the freeway, and those things were eradicated. But the stigma with women growing up is women from the East Side is hardcore. We like, gang bangers, and but there's a level of authenticity, and there was always this comparison between East Side women and West Side women, but I know some bad East Side women who started off in the trenches, who have some amazing testimonies, and I'm one of them, you know and so not to my own horn, but I am one of them. And so just being clear about where we come from is so important. And I think as women, middle-aged women, I don't know if we really senior citizens, Cheryl, at this point. She refused to believe that if you over 55, you are a senior citizen, that we share these stories, that whenever we get an opportunity with the younger generation who believe that they got it hard, and they do, with social media and all of these different components, AI now and all of this, we didn't have that. And so we had more solidarity. I think we had more community, more neighbors engaged each other. But I think we need to share more of these traditional stories because it made us who we are.
I remember I have to laugh because Justice, unofficially my niece, my god baby. I know it's somebody else's god baby, but she mine too. And so one day, Crystal had me pick up Justice. I think she was going to the test for SAT programming or something. And so I said, Justice, let's go for a ride. And she said, where we going, Miss Cheryl? I said, we just gonna take a ride. So I drove real slow down Mack Avenue, and there was some ladies on the corner. She said, what are you doing? So they working. She said, well, ain't no building here. Like, no, they working. They street workers. She's like, what? And then we kept riding down Mack. And then I took her to Dairy Queen on Mack and across Mack and Burns.
Fisher. Mack and Fisher, yeah.
Mack and Fisher. And so she was like, why are these, nobody's ordering. So she makes this observation. Now, she's probably about 13. She says, nobody's ordering ice cream. Isn't this Dairy Queen? Everybody was ordering French fries and coney dogs and fish sandwiches. Nobody ordered a milkshake or an ice cream sandwich. She's like, this is crazy. Nobody's ordering ice cream. Is this Dairy Queen? I was like, no, this is something else. And so we stood in line for a long time. And I was like, this is the culture. This is where we come from. When you can go to Dairy Queen and get a whole steak and a fish sandwich and everything. So I think sometimes we have to embrace where we come from and
we do. We
experience it. Yeah.
So we only have a few minutes left, and my child, of course, does not have the story I have, but I have shared my story with her. And I think as parents, it's good for your kids to know who you really are and what you've really come from. So every age she turns, I have a story and I tell her about it. And so I have one coming up when she turned 26. Something happened in my life at 26 that I'll share with her. But as we go to a close, Miss Cheryl, what do you want to thank your mother for specifically? One thing you want to thank her for?
I want to thank her for making the decision to give me to my great grandmother.
That's a good one because she had sense enough to know that whatever was going on with her, I'm gonna
Yeah.
make sure still that you're covered,
Yep.
that
That
you're cared
she
for.
right. She made sure that she put me in good hands to take care of me, and I never missed a beat.
Amen. Amen. Miss Zeta says she has a different story than we have, and it sounds like we might have to come back to this conversation. So with my mother, she used to always say, "You have to laugh to keep from crying," which leads me to my project here in honor of my mother. Is coming out within the next month or so. You have to laugh to keep from crying. A story of survival to the sacred call. This book is dedicated to her because when I reflect back on laugh to keep from crying, there was a balance. It was like life. Listen, it's not easy, and she didn't paint a picture for me that wasn't there. So I thank her for really not sugarcoating life. And I think it contributes to my ability to see things as they are. And so again, we were here today to say thank you to our SHEroes who are no longer with us, / our parent, our mothers. And for those of you in the audience who no longer have your mom, and just remember, grab something from history and live it out on their behalf and celebrate what they could do instead of what they could not. And so we thank you for joining us in this rich conversation. Shout out to all of you who are participating and being a part of this discussion. And we look forward to discussing this once again. You all have an amazing night.
Blessings. Thank you.